with audio, just let me know. So hello everyone and welcome to today's EAUC webinar. The title of this webinar is Successful Campus-Style Travel Plans and will last approximately an hour with time for questions during that time. It is in the Travel and Transport Live framework, and in terms of competency levels, it is a starting out and on the road. More information about these can be found on the event section of the EAUC website. Thank you for registering, and thanks also to today's speakers. We have Carol Somper from Temple Group and Joanna Marshall-Cook from University College London. My name's Emma, and I'm the Member Events and Communities Officer here at the EAUC. If you have any specific event, webinar or training requests, I am happy to talk to you at any time. I also work with our community groups, so as an EAUC member, I encourage you to join one of our communities of practice or regional groups. More information about these and how to join can be found in the member zone on our website. You may have previously attended or heard of exchange webinars. These are continuing, but due to their popularity, we have developed a new range of EAUC webinars. These are for EAUC members only, like yourselves, and are an added benefit to your membership. They are more detailed with clear learning outcomes, expert speakers, and will allow for more complex topics. They will all last between 1 and 1.5 hours, depending on the topic. Shortly after the webinar has finished, you will receive a certificate of attendance to place on your personal development file as a record of training. So we've just got a little bit of housekeeping to go over now. I'm hoping that everybody can hear me well. I have muted you all to avoid background noise, and you will continue to be muted throughout the webinar. If you are having any technical issues at all throughout this webinar, please let me know by either posting in the on-screen chat box that you can see or sending me an email to easton@eauc.org.uk. Hopefully most of you have working microphones. Don't worry if you don't, because you'll still have an opportunity to ask any questions at the end of today's webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded as a resource with all presentations later on. Please feel free to share these resources with any colleagues or fellow EAUC members. Once the webinar has finished, you will be sent a short survey for us to gain your feedback. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey, as the results will help us to improve our CPD and events. Okay, so that's it from me for now. I'll talk to you again at the end of today's webinar. Thank you again for registering, and I will now pass you over to today's speakers, Carol and Joanna.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Just a little bit about Temple Group as an EAUC member. We work on rail infrastructure projects. We're working for the DfT on sustainability in rail. We're also heavily involved in the Transport Systems Catapult, looking at intelligent mobility, and we also include a lot of work around transport and traffic management for new developments. Joanna Marshall-Cook from UCL. UCL needs no introduction really as a world-class higher education institute, which is undergoing substantive capital in an investment program. So both of today's case studies are linked to a planning requirement. But I'll just sorry, just working out how to move to the next slide at the moment. Thanks very much. So the first case study we'll be covering is British Airways Commuting Study, and we'll be looking at Heathrow Commuter as an exemplary campus-style travel planning initiative. And then I'll pass over to Joanna, who will take you through the approach that she's taking, or UCL is establishing their commuting baseline and parameters for their travel planning initiatives. So, British Airways. Well, this project arose from a planning need. British Airways are based out near Heathrow in a state-of-the-art development called Waterside, and it's being based out by Heathrow is disconnected a bit from the local area, but it's very well connected with a number of different modes of travel. However, it transpired in looking into this new planning project that they had very little information in-house on how their staff actually got to work, what routes were, journey times, absolutely no information on commuting by mode, and an unmet need for non-car transport. There were a substantial number of public transport operator deals available to staff, but very few staff seemed to know much about them. There were some cycling facilities for staff, but very little uptake, and a number of footpath networks, but these off-road networks had surfacing and access problems in places. It wasn't a complete network. And we did get the impression in talking to British Airways Property Services that there was a lot of concern and anxiety, really, about the problems that staff were having in getting into the office. So we suggested it would be worthwhile to set up a commuting study and find out what the baseline was for the company. We suggested that they should use SurveyMonkey, which is a software tool that you can access online. It's very cost effective. A year's license is around £300 plus VAT. It's extremely easy to use. You don't need any training to use it. There are a number of tutorials, but it's very easy to get to grips with. We then brought together a number of different sections and teams from across British Airways. It was very important to get buy-in from the HR department because of the records that they had on staff numbers, locations. Property Services, who are our main clients anyway, also the corporate environment team responsible for the corporate reporting activities that British Airways are engaged in as a company, and also facilities management and car parking, because they had a very good understanding of the day-to-day challenges and issues that staff were facing. And ultimately, the overall aim of the commuting study was to identify existing working patterns. SurveyMonkey is a very good tool because you can ask a number of quantitative questions and also qualitative information at the same time. And you can set the process up so that it's a live system and you get data being analysed as people submit their responses. We suggested it would be a very good idea for BA to provide an incentive for the staff to take part in the survey. So there was a fair amount of promotion about 3 weeks before the survey went live, both with emails around to different teams, through the staff internet and notice board. The incentive to encourage staff to take part was that it was completely anonymous, and also that they would get John Lewis vouchers. I think it was about £300 worth of John Lewis vouchers for a prize draw for all the entries that came in before a certain date. So that worked really well. And one of the most important and possibly not surprising results was that almost 80% of staff were driving into work, and that very few car shared. We asked about different modes, and here's the breakdown on screen. A fair amount, about 20%, were using public transport, and BA have a number of shuttle buses that go from Terminal 5 at Heathrow to Waterside. It takes about 5 minutes. It's not very long, but it was a surprisingly small proportion of the staff that were using public transport. In looking at the time frame for people coming into work, again, the majority of people coming in were working on a 9 to 5 basis, which was surprising because BA do have a policy for flexible working, but this policy wasn't very well promoted across the company. There was very little take-up, and in fact some teams were actively discouraged from flexible working. But because of the location of Waterside and the amount of traffic to and fro Heathrow on a regular basis, daily basis, plus the location of both Heathrow and Waterside, it meant that British Airways staff were adding to a big congestion problem at peak commuting times every day. We also thought it would be very worthwhile to use GIS to plot locations of staff, where they're coming in from to get to Waterside every day. We suggested it was worthwhile asking respondees to the survey to provide us with their postcode. British Airways personnel, HR team were a little reluctant to do that because they felt it was important for the survey to be anonymous. And I don't know whether this is something that you may have an issue with in your own commuting surveys, but it really oughtn't to be. It's impossible to pinpoint exactly an individual just from their postcode, but it does show that the vast proportion of staff coming in are coming in from quite a range, and also the numbers coming in from using public transport in the blue colouring is quite scattered when you look at the zoom-in image, although they seem to be prevailing mostly from the east. We've also looked at the data in a slightly different way using colour for distance measures, and again it gave us a very good impression of where numbers of people are coming in from quite a short distance, and that isn't surprising either because most trips by car particularly are within 5 kilometres. So when we asked staff particularly about car sharing, again there was a very, very little take-up, and of those who did car share, most of them were also car users. Because there was such pressure on BA's current parking facilities, the aim was to one of the things that they have to do, because of the sheer volume of staff using cars at the moment, is to get people to have one day a week as a car-free day. And this creates huge problems amongst the staff because, again, they're not allowed, flexible working isn't widely promoted. A number of staff aren't allowed to work from home on their non-car day, so it creates quite a lot of again, anxiety and chaos at times. We also asked in the survey about people's car make and model, year of registration, so that we could get an idea of carbon emissions. So this is splitting up mostly into diesel and petrol use, and we found that there were a very small proportion of low carbon vehicles, very small proportion of hybrid and smart cars. But again, it gives BA as a company information that they can use to look at incentives for those people who really do need to drive or feel that they need to drive, and possibly looking at ways of encouraging them to buy differently, and there could be in-house schemes for doing that. A very small proportion of drivers had large cars of over 2 litres capacity, which was, I think, perhaps quite good, unless in looking into the data in more detail, the vast majority of those car users are from senior management, so there was a bit of a capacity awareness raising and behaviour changing issue there, perhaps. So once we've got all of the details from the commuting study, and we had a response rate of about 40%, which was excellent out of a staff complement of just under 4,000. We ran a series of focus groups over a day, and we invited all of those respondees to come to the focus groups, but we also made them available to staff who hadn't responded to the survey to hear about the results, just to find out from staff whether they felt that the results were surprising or not, and to provide more information on the qualitative data that we gathered on people's concerns about the current options for journeys to work, to also give them information about Heathrow Commuter as a campus-style travel initiative that is very active and extremely successful for the whole of the Heathrow area, because we knew from the survey that few staff really knew very much about it. We invited feedback during the focus group on what action staff would like British Airways to take in revising their existing travel plan and making travel options much more available to staff. So I go on to talk about Heathrow Commuter now. This has been going for roughly 6 years or so. It's providing seamless travel options for 76,000 daily commuters, which is pretty amazing. And it's a partnership between the local planning authorities, local transport providers, a whole host of local businesses, not just British Airways Authority at Heathrow itself, although Heathrow is the main operator running the service. There's a fantastic website, and if you Google Heathrow Commuter, it will take you onto the home page, and you can see how it's set up to provide very immediate and user-friendly information for people using a very wide range of travel modes. One of the interesting things about Heathrow Commuter, Heathrow has the UK's only free travel zone, and this is something that obviously it would be very difficult for a university to replicate. But it is interesting to see how it works for all of the Heathrow Commuter members. Looking at bus and coach services available as surface transport within the Heathrow region, there are 31 local bus services, and of those, 13 have a very early morning bus service with buses arriving at Heathrow at 4 AM, and that goes right through to about 11 o'clock at night. The coach services available include those that are regular travel provisions for passengers going to and from Heathrow as well, but they're available for workers to use on a regular basis. And most recent stats coming from this service is that bus use is on track to double since Heathrow Commuter was first set up. So that shows the incentives provided are really working. Any Heathrow employee, and I use the term Heathrow employee loosely because this applies to anybody working within the Heathrow area. They get a 30% discount on selected buses and trains. They get a travel card. They can go for a monthly or a season ticket, and a lot of the local employers are also encouraged to provide interest-free loans for staff, so that it makes the purchase of season tickets easier. Getting to Heathrow by underground, all staff can access annual travel cards and Oyster cards in the way that anybody else can. So there isn't a special deal for Oyster card users at the moment, although there are negotiations underway to try and get an extra discount for Heathrow commuter members. In looking at getting to Heathrow by train on a daily basis, the scheme called Heathrow Connect was launched in 2010, so it's fairly recent, and the scheme was set up to target 3,500 employees who live within a kilometre or a 30-minute walk from Menary station. So they were a core group. All of those 3,500 people were written to with an explanation about the service, the discounts that they could get, and there's a 75% discount off season tickets, annual or monthly, to use the Heathrow Connect service, which I think is one of the biggest reasons that it's been so popular. The service has tripled in use since launch, and it's so far removing road transport to make it possible to save 977 tonnes of carbon dioxide emissions on an annual basis, and it's obviously helping to reduce congestion in the area. In looking at encouraging cycling, all of those 3,500 people plus who live within a very few kilometres of their main place of work within the Heathrow zone, they now have 2,500 members, and 800 more members joined last year alone. there's a 10% discount off all purchases. So that's just not your bicycle, it's also any equipment that you might need, helmets, knee pads, clothing, 10% off all the servicing parts. Labour is free for service, so you can leave your bike at the cycle hub and get it serviced during the day. There are free maintenance training sessions and a really good call-out service. So if for some reason your bike gets damaged, you can't mend a puncture, you just call up and somebody from the cycle hub will come out, take you to work and also repair your bicycle while you're at work. And interestingly, it's at present the only UK airport cycle to work scheme operating, which is quite strange. But the whole thing is award-winning. It's a real success story. So I think there are some really good lessons to learn by looking at Heathrow Cycle Hub in more detail. If we look at the Carshare scheme, this has 8,100 members as of this year. It's the largest single-site scheme in the world. It's incredibly successful. Roughly 2,000 sharers are using the system per week, covers 250 plus companies, so that gives you a really good idea of the scale of the initiative. And again, it's for Heathrow only, for the Heathrow area. Again, if you, for some reason, your car share gets you to work in the morning, but you can't get your lift home for some reason, there's an emergency ride home, nobody's ever stranded. The website was relaunched in July last year, and these relaunches are regular because research has shown, looking at the usage for the Carshare scheme, that you have to keep refreshing people's memories and getting them to remind them about the benefits of the scheme, the ease of use of the scheme. But membership has been increasing considerably since it started, and the aim is to maintain around a 40% reduction in car use across the Heathrow area, and this is easily meeting its target so far. They're well on the way to getting to a 50% car use reduction. So coming back to British Airways, having taken people back through the benefits that they get from, or they would get from Heathrow Commuter if BA were to join the scheme. In looking at the travel plan, we identified that they didn't have a board member who had an overall responsibility for implementing the travel plan and making sure that targets were being met. So that was an immediate and obvious one to make sure that BA act on. The other thing to do was to appoint a travel plan manager who wasn't responsible for implementing the travel plan, but was responsible for overseeing and coordinating the plan's implementation. And we stressed to the steering group for the commuting study that human resources, communications, every single section, department within British Airways, not just property services and facilities management, are responsible for implementing the travel plan, and that's a really important point that I think it's worthwhile stressing, that no travel plan manager or coordinator needs to feel that it's their responsibility to make sure that the travel plan is a success. It must be a team effort, and the travel plan manager or coordinator role is really very much that, to facilitate and coordinate the implementation of the plan. Obviously, we advised British Airways that they needed to engage fully with Heathrow Commuter, and that means that they have to make sure that it's actively and regularly promoted throughout the company, to make sure that there's very easy and immediate access to the Heathrow Commuter website through one click on British Airways' own intranet site, so that it's easy to find. And I think, again, that's a lesson that it's worthwhile promoting if you're thinking of doing something similar, or you can plug into a local employer scheme in your area, so that the university is able to simply join in and promote the deals available through an employer membership scheme rather than sort of having to struggle on your own. The other thing, and this is obvious for any plan, that you do need smart targets. You do need smart objectives so that it's easy to measure performance against the targets you set yourself. And this is something that I'm sure that Joanna will pick up when she starts to talk about the activities going on at UCL. Setting a timetable for introducing recommended measures is absolutely essential. There's no point in having a travel plan that sits on a shelf and isn't an actively implemented initiative. It's got to be more than just a document. So effective communication amongst staff, again, has to be an ongoing activity, and this is something that HR teams particularly, as well as section heads, have got something, need to really make an effort to progress on a regular basis. So that's me done. And before I pass over to Joanna, if anybody wants to start posting any questions in the chat area, please do. So whilst you're typing away, I'll pass over to Joanna.
Hello everyone, my name's Joanna Marshall-Cook. I work within the Environmental Sustainability team at UCL, and my role is to lead on our carbon reduction project, but I also look after the travel related things at UCL, sort of a temporary thing. We're looking to get a travel coordinator within the next few months, but I've been developing a new travel plan for UCL that really partly been in response to, as Carol said, a very large construction and refurbishment programme that's going on at UCL, so in order to support our planning applications for those projects, but also to try and implement better sustainable travel choices for students and staff at UCL. So I'm just going to spend the next sort of 15 minutes or so talking through how we develop that travel plan and what we're going to be doing in the next sort of year or so. So the first thing that we did once we wanted to develop a new travel plan was to look at the types of travel that were already happening at UCL. So, for example, we've got commuting both from staff and students. We've got the start and end of term travel for students, and we've got an awful lot of international students at UCL, so that's actually quite a big impact for us. We've also got business travel, and again, as a sort of world-class research university, we have a lot of people flying out to conferences and taking the train to sort of UK conferences, so quite a big area. And also the sort of day-to-day deliveries of scientific equipment, office supplies, etc. There's quite a large amount of that. And finally, because of this large construction and refurbishment programme that we have currently, we have going to be having an awful lot of construction vehicles coming to site. So we wanted to baseline really where we were in terms of all of those different types of travel, so that we could look at how we could mitigate the impacts of them. So the first thing we did was to look at commuting, both for staff and students, and we managed to persuade our HR department to provide us with the postcodes for each of the staff and students that are at UCL. It took us a little while to do that for data protection reasons, but we managed to persuade them that it would be completely anonymous. And we then engaged a sort of social enterprise called Mapping for Change, which is an affiliate of UCL, who took all this data forward and basically put it onto a sort of geographical information system map, like the one that you can see, which really just shows the distance that staff are living from UCL. So we've got different maps, for different. So, for example, this is one for 50 kilometres from UCL, but we also had ones showing the whole of the UK and also very close to home, so just sort of 1 or 2 kilometres from UCL, which gave us an idea of how far away people were commuting in. And actually, you can see from this one that shows the sort of 50 kilometres, there's a lot of people commuting in from within the sort of London's main transport or sort of main area, but there is also a lot of people coming in from all around London in the surrounding counties, so Surrey and Hertfordshire and things. So we thought it's very important to make sure that we've got a travel plan that's going to accommodate the travel needs for all of those people, whether they're coming in from central London or from much further afield. We actually even had some people who were commuting from Scotland, but we've sort of since understood that actually they're not commuting every day from Scotland, they're more commuting once a week and then staying in London for the week and then going back. So the postcode data doesn't give you the most accurate picture of what's going on, but it's a good indication of where people are coming from. And as we said, we did the same thing for international students and UK students. So we looked at where our international students are living and how far away they are having to come in order to come to the beginning and end of term. So as you can see, there's a lot of European students, but we've also got a large percentage in Asia and also America. So we need to think about how we can reduce the impact of that travel. And as I said, we've got this sort of more closer to home student term time commuting travel. So there's a lot coming from our halls of residence, which are all within walking distance of UCL's main campus, and those are highlighted in red. But there's also lots of people living out in other student accommodation that's also in a walkable area, so that's within 2 kilometres of UCL. So we've had this data around where people were living, but we didn't really have an understanding about what mode of transport they were using to get from their home to UCL. So we used 2 methods to try and identify this. The first was the NUS's Environmental Behaviours Survey, which asked people what mode of transport they were using on a daily basis to get to university. And that's for staff and students, which is what you can see here. And the second was census data from 2011, so looking at people who are living in the area of UCL, how they generally got to work. And the 2 pieces of data actually coincided quite a lot, really, so which gave us a bit of confidence in the Environmental Behaviours Survey. So from that you can see we've actually got a majority of people who are walking to work, and there's more students who are walking to university than staff, but there's still a large percentage of staff who are walking. We've also got a reasonable amount of people cycling to UCL, so that's 9%. And then the majority of the rest of people are taking public transport of some form or another, so either the underground, a bus, or the overland trains when they're coming from sort of further away from London. And actually we've got very little amount of people who are driving to UCL, and that's probably partly because we don't really have any car parking facilities on site. We've got probably less than 50 car parking spaces for about 10,000 staff and nearly 30,000 students. And we also charge quite a significant amount for each car parking space. So if people did want to drive in, they'd have to find parking elsewhere, which in central London is quite challenging. But I think that probably explains why there's not so many people driving in. And the other thing we looked at was business travel, so how were people travelling on their business trips, for example, to conferences. And this data can be quite difficult to collect, but we actually used our expenses system to look at how much money was being spent on each different mode of travel. to try and give us an idea of the carbon emissions from each of those different modes and the full carbon footprint of our business travel. So we took data from the expenses system and converted that on a sort of pound per CO2 basis to identify that actually the absolute vast majority of our business travel carbon emissions are from air travel. So, and then everything else is sort of dwarfed by that really in terms of international and domestic business travel, which gave us really a focus for what we need to be tackling around business travel. The other baseline we wanted to look at was the sort of deliveries, both operational deliveries, so delivering parcels and things, and also construction deliveries for our construction projects. So the graph that you can see shows the kind of average daily number of deliveries to UCL over the course of the year. And this is taken from both our security team logging over a 6-week period how many operational deliveries were coming onto site, so for delivering packages and things. And it's also based on industry data about the amount of construction that we are undertaking, what the number of delivery vehicles, the construction materials we would expect to receive. So as you can see from the graph, it's possible that we might be receiving up to 200 deliveries onto site every day if we were to continue with this sort of standard approach to allowing anyone to order things when they wanted to, and for construction companies to have deliveries when they wanted. And we've, based on the sort of surveys that the security team did, we've already got over 100 deliveries coming onto site every day. So and there's a lot of problems associated with that in terms of it's quite a compact site. We've got a lot of students coming out of lecture theatres and trying to use the same routes that are being used for delivery vehicles coming into site. So there's a sort of safety issue there. There's also an air quality issue in terms of that number of vehicles coming to site. And there's also a space in terms of parking. If we have 200 vehicles, we need to find somewhere for them to park whilst they deliver the goods that they're bringing. So this is sort of another area that we wanted to really focus on in trying to address. So the next thing we did is to look at baselining the facilities that we have. So in terms of cycle parking, for example, we knew where we had cycle parking, but we didn't really have an accurate picture of how much that cycle parking was being used by students and staff. So again, we got our security team to go out and monitor the sort of percentage utilisation of each of those cycle racks. And you can see we're actually, nearly at full capacity for quite a lot of the time at all of our cycle racks. And some of them are even over capacity, where they've sort of chained 2 bikes to, or 4 bikes to 1 cycle hoop. And that's sort of met out with the amount of fly parking that was observed on site. So we again had security to go and look around and take photos where they identified that fly parking was an issue. And sometimes this isn't a problem if it's just on some railings, but sometimes they were blocking fire routes, or they were blocking disabled access ways. So it's really a problem that needs to be addressed in the travel plan, is providing more cycle parking facilities. We also looked at showers. So we don't have showers in all of our 200 buildings, but and where we do have showers, they're quite often overutilised. So between sort of 6 and 9 in the morning, there will be a queue for the showers. So we, this is again security. They're being very helpful for this whole process. They went round and looked at each of the showers and identified, whether they were functioning or not, and what the queue was like for them at sort of peak time. And because this was a planning document, we also wanted to provide a baseline for public transport facilities that there were for people at UCL. So we just did a survey really of what the public transport facilities were at each of our different sites within central London, which you can sort of see one of them is demonstrated here. So based on all of that baseline data, we kind of identified about 4 areas really that we wanted to focus the travel plan on. So unlike maybe a more rural or even a sort of smaller city university, car use really isn't a problem at UCL, and so we didn't want to spend a lot of time focusing on reducing car use when that wasn't really a main carbon sort of problem. So we focused instead on getting more people walking and cycling instead of taking public transport, and we also wanted to reduce deliveries onto campus, both from construction activities and operational deliveries, and we wanted to look at how we could reduce the impact of our business travel, because as you can see, there's just a very large quantity of flights that's been taken for business purposes, some of which are definitely short-haul flights that potentially could be replaced by train travel. And we also wanted to reduce the need for some of that travel, so improving the facilities on site that would mean it wasn't necessary to fly to an event or a meeting. So I'll just quickly talk through some of those activities that we focused the travel plan on. So one of them is improving facilities for cyclists and walkers. So we are just about to go out to tender for over 300 new cycle spaces on campus. And because of the transient nature of students and staff moving around from different buildings on campus, we actually have gone for a cluster approach for our cycling facilities. So we've got cycle parking is we've got a number of areas dedicated to cycle parking, and then they will be next to a building that has good shower facilities and lockers, so that it's sort of a seamless transition from parking your bike to showering and putting your things in the locker or taking things out of your locker, and it's not sort of lots of moving around. And we're also going to have a bike repair hub, a couple of bike repair hubs that will have a pump and a repair stand with tools attached to it that people can use. And we're looking even at a vending machine which will provide sort of spare parts like inner tubes and puncture repair kits and lights and things like that. So that's sort of improving the facilities for cyclists and walkers. We're also doing quite a lot of work with Camden Council, who are our local council, and the Transport for London around improving the local cycle infrastructure, so kind of making some of the roads around the campus two-way for cyclists, where they're existing only one way and you have to sort of go on a long convoluted route to get into campus, and generally making some of the roads more safe. In fact, one of the things that is likely to happen is that one of the roads that's a sort of main thoroughfare through the campus will become cycle only, so there won't be any cars on it, which would be very welcome from staff and students alike. The next thing we wanted to do was reduce the impact of business travel. So we've got better video conferencing and teleconferencing facilities, and we're kind of improving that as part of the new construction works in a lot of our buildings. And we're investigating how we could change the expenses system so that people would be encouraged to take the train rather than fly for short-haul flights, possibly by allowing people to travel sort of business class on the train for those longer journeys. And finally, we're looking at consolidating deliveries to campus. So we're just currently engaging a construction logistics provider who are investigating how we would do this. But the basic idea would be to all deliveries that come to site would go to a central consolidation centre to be packaged up. And the consolidation centre would not be on the UCL campus, it would be slightly outside London probably. And then each day there would be a sort of a milk round, so that those goods would be packaged up onto a single vehicle, and then that would come round to each of the different buildings on campus where the things needed to be delivered. So it would be sort of just-in-time delivery of things rather than sort of everybody ordering things and it arriving on campus whenever it was ready, and so that could reduce the number of deliveries from sort of 200 to only 4 deliveries a day. Should be quite a significant reduction in sort of carbon emissions from the transport, but also improved air quality and improved safety. And just a bit of information on the consultation. We did a significant consultation with people about the travel plan, so the local planning authority to make sure it would be appropriate for their planning needs, stakeholders within the estates department, so especially about the new cycling facilities, so fire, and making sure there wasn't any blocking fire routes, and working quite closely with security, again, to make sure they were safe places for people to leave their bikes, and working with the capital projects team to make sure we weren't putting cycle parking where they were about to build a new building and that kind of thing. And we also worked with some of the bicycle user groups and the building managers on site. So they all seem to be quite happy with the travel plan that we've come up with. So that's it. If you've got any further questions, be happy to answer them with Carol, and you can contact me for anything else on my email address. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Joanna, and thank you also to Carol. Okay, so we have a few minutes. We have about 15 minutes. If anyone does have any questions, you can either ask them in the chat box, or if you let me know in the chat box that you would like to verbally ask a question, I can unmute you. So I'll give you all a couple of moments. Joanna and Carol, are there any specific questions or anything you'd like to ask our delegates today?
It would be useful to know how many people have started making or getting to grips with baselining, and whether they have any particular issues with that.
Okay, brilliant. Again, if anyone could answer that would be great. I think in the meantime, I just have a quick question for you, Carol, actually. I picked up on the with the Carshare scheme that you were talking about with Heathrow. I picked up on the emergency journey. How does that work? Who organises that, and who would drive the person home?
Well, Heathrow Commuter has got a core staff complement and an emergency number. So there's a coordinator, travel coordinator, who you would speak to, and then they would arrange for you to be given a lift home by another Carshare member as first priority. Or if there's an absolute problem, a member of the Heathrow Commuter team would see that person got home on time.
Okay, that's good. And do you think that that's something that could be implemented into institutions, perhaps?
I think it's something that's well worth considering, and I'm sure that if anybody wanted to know any further information, I can certainly pass on a contact detail for Heathrow Commuter and their coordinator, Friday O'Sullivan.
Yeah, no, I think that would be very useful. I know from the recent travel meeting that car sharing is a current topic at the moment that would be worth picking up on and looking into within institutions.
One of the things that came up very strongly at the Focus group day that we had were that people were concerned their lifestyle just didn't fit into car sharing. They were concerned that there would be times when if they were a driver, they may not want to car share. They prefer driving in suspended isolation, or if they had school pickups and drop-offs or things like that, it would make it too difficult. But there's such a huge membership with a tremendous amount of variability. Again, Heathrow Commuter staff will do the matching. We'll find people that really do have very similar travel needs, and it could be around perhaps even also coordinating with school pickups and drop-offs as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Carol. I'm sure that'll be useful for some of our members today. I have a question from Mohammed to, I think it's to Joanna. He says, how would you see the accuracy of your data for carbon emissions calculation/baseline, especially for business travel and international students travel? Where do you think that you can do more in reducing travel-related emissions?
Okay. I mean, I think the accuracy of our data in terms of expenses for business travel, the total spend is accurate. That I've checked with finance a number of times. The way that the spend is allocated between the different modes and is also accurate, but it's how well the spend correlates with the carbon emissions for that mode. And something that we're actually changing our finance system this year, and one of the things that we've put in the new finance system is something that means that people have to say, for every expense claim, they have to say where they've travelled from and where they've travelled to, and that will sort of do an automatic calculation of the number of miles that they've travelled, and then they also have to tell us which mode of travel they've used. So from sort of 2015 onwards, we will have a much better way of collecting travel data. The other thing, in terms of actually reducing carbon emissions from business travel, introducing sort of better video conferencing facilities so that people could potentially not go to a conference but dial in is something that we've been promoting. But we're also looking at how we can sort of reward people who are not travelling on business, and to try and make it a bit more of a requirement to justify some of the business travel that's going on. So that there's an approvals process, a better approvals process for some of that business travel to try and reduce some of the more excessive business travel that's going on.
Okay, brilliant. Hopefully that answers your question, Mohammed. Does anyone else have a question to ask? If you just quickly write it in the chat box, or if you would like me to unmute you, I can, and you can ask it aloud to our speakers today. Just give you a few moments.
So I didn't answer the international students travel question from Mohammed, I just realised. The data for the international students is, we know where they live from their postcode data, but we don't know how frequently they are going home. So they might only be going home at the end of the year, or they might not be going home at all during their 3 years at UCL. We just don't know. And we don't know what mode of travel they're using. So for example, people in France might be taking the train rather than flying. So in order to improve the accuracy of that data, we are looking at doing significant piece of survey work with international students to try and understand what their travel choices are. So we're going to be working with the International Student Office to set that up. But that's probably as far as we've got.
I'll just ask Joanna a question about that. Because students have to register at the start of each term, is that a point where you could gather some data by asking some questions around travel origin, mode?
Yeah, so I think we're going to think about the sort of clever ways that we can capture that data without necessarily getting people to fill in a survey, but it's sort of on our list of things to do this year to get better data on international travel, because that's such a big area of emissions for us.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Joanna and Carol. It doesn't seem like we have any more questions at this moment in time, but if anyone does think of anything, you can always contact myself or contact our speakers directly. Just as a reminder, just in case you are unaware, I did mention it earlier, we do have communities of practice. One of our EAUC communities of practice is the Transport Planning Network Group. It's a group that meets regularly, and there's always discussions going on the closed network GISMail and things like that. If you would like to become a member of it, you are more than welcome to. I do encourage it. If you'd just like to get in contact with myself or my email address, which is on the screen now, and or have a look on our website and have a look at our other communities of practice and things like that. So for now, unless there's anything else to add from either Carol or Joanna, or if there are any more questions, I think we'll end it there. Perfect. Okay, thank you everybody, and thank you for taking part today. Thank you again to our speakers.